The wind that morning didn't howl. It screamed. By the time the storm passed, the prairie looked like a battlefield. Fences torn down, cattle scattered, the sky still bruised with thunder. When Caleb Thorne, a widowed rancher scraping by on the edge of New Mexico territory, stepped outside his shack to count the dead, he never expected to find them. 2 figures lay twisted among the ruined fence posts. Not men, not quite. At first, he thought they were corpses of soldiers, but as he drew closer, his stomach tightened. They were women, and giants by any measure. The smaller one, if that word even fit, stood over 6 feet tall, her arms roped with the kind of muscle that came from a lifetime of battle. The other was colossal, maybe 7 feet, with shoulders like a warhorse and hair tangled with feathers and blood. Even unconscious, they radiated something raw and ancient. Like mountain spirits forced into human form, Caleb froze. He knew the markings, the beadwork, the sacred paint half washed from their faces. Navajo, or maybe Chiricahua Apache. And that meant trouble deeper than any storm could bring. Every man on the frontier knew the rule. Help an Indian, and you hang with him. Yet when the taller woman stirred, her cracked lips whispering something in a language he didn't understand, the sound wasn't savage. It was broken, human, terrified. For a long moment, Caleb just stood there, staring at 2 dying giants while the wind rattled the bones of his dying ranch. His rifle hung heavy at his side. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But when the smaller one coughed blood and tried to shield her sister with her own body, even half dead, something inside him broke. "Hell with it," he muttered. And that was the moment everything changed. He dragged them toward the barn, 2 bodies that weighed more than oxen, leaving crimson streaks in the dirt. The taller one's wound was bad, a blade wound, deep and deliberate. Whoever had done this wanted them dead. And soon, Caleb saw why. Their jewelry alone could buy half the county. These weren't ordinary women, they were royalty. By dusk, both lay wrapped in his old wool blankets, breaths shallow, fever rising. Caleb's mind raced. If the territorial rangers found out he was hiding Apache warriors, they'd burn his land to ash. But something about them, their size, their courage even in agony, told him these women hadn't fallen in battle. They'd fled something worse. Then he saw the hoof prints. Not just one set, dozens, circling the far ridge like wolves closing in. Caleb snatched his rifle, heart pounding. Whoever hunted these women wasn't far. The wounded giant stirred, opening eyes the color of thunderclouds. "They come," she whispered. "If they find us, you die too." He didn't answer, didn't have to. The horizon glowed with torches, and in that instant, as he stood between 2 dying warriors and the oncoming riders, Caleb Thorne realized this wasn't about mercy anymore. It was about survival, and a secret buried deep in the desert, one that could ignite a war between nations if it ever came to light. The storm had passed, but the real reckoning had only begun. The first torch appeared on the ridge just after sunset. Then came another, and another. By the time Caleb counted 8, the truth hit him like a rifle butt to the ribs. They weren't riders. They were hunters. The women inside stirred restlessly. The taller one, fever-bright and trembling, tried to rise. "Stay down," Caleb whispered. "You'll tear your stitches." She turned her head, eyes burning like coals under the dim lamplight. "Name?" she rasped. "Caleb Thorne." She repeated it softly, as if testing the sound of it against her pain. "I am Naya," she said. "Sister's name Tala. We run from death. But death runs faster." Caleb looked through the cracks in the barn wall. The riders were descending, silent as ghosts. He could see their horses now, painted black and white, Apache war paint glimmering faintly in the torchlight. "Why are they after you?" he asked, voice tight. Naiya's jaw flexed, her breath ragged. "Because my sister said no." Caleb frowned. "No to what?" "To the chief's son. He wanted her for wife. She refused. Now we are traitors to clan." The words hit him harder than he expected. A woman hunted for saying no, hunted by her own kin. He'd thought the frontier's cruelty was reserved for men with guns. But here it was, raw and merciless, written in blood and dust. Then the hoofbeats grew louder. He killed the lantern and crouched beside the sisters. "If they find you here, we're all dead," he whispered. Tala's fevered hand reached for him, enormous fingers trembling. "You should run," she murmured. "They won't spare you." Caleb almost laughed, but it came out broken. "Run where? There's nowhere left to run." He looked around his ruined barn, roof half gone, hay wet with storm water, rifle nearly empty. His wife's rocking chair sat broken by the wall, the last remnant of the home they'd tried to build before fever took her. Everything he loved had already been torn from him. Maybe helping these women was madness, or maybe it was the first honest thing he'd done in years. Outside, a voice thundered across the plain, guttural Apache words that made Naya flinch. "What did he say?" Caleb asked. "Chief's son," she whispered. "He calls for my sister. Says her name with curse. Says he will take her dead if not alive." Tala stirred weakly beside them, her skin glistening with fever sweat. "I would rather die than belong," she muttered. The hunters dismounted. Torches bobbed closer, their light flickering across the walls like fire demons. Caleb tightened his grip on the rifle. When the first silhouette crossed the threshold, he fired. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder, scattering the horses and sending the others diving for cover. A bullet punched through the barn wall, splintering wood beside his head. Naya was already on her feet, towering, blood-stained, magnificent in her defiance. She seized a fallen axe from the tool rack, the handle almost too small for her huge hands. "We fight," she said simply, but Caleb saw what she didn't. Tala, slumped against the straw, eyes unfocused, lips turning blue. He dropped the rifle and ran to her, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heartbeat fluttered like a trapped bird. "She's fading," he gasped. Naya knelt, the weight of her grief making the floorboards groan. "They took everything," she whispered. "Now they take her too." Outside, the chief's son shouted again, demanding surrender. Caleb looked from Tala's still form to the woman kneeling beside her, to the door glowing orange with torchlight. "If we go out there, we die. If we stay, they burn us." Naya lifted her head slowly, tears cutting clean lines through the dust on her face. "Then we choose where we die." The night cracked open with gunfire and firelight. And in that burning barn, surrounded by death and smoke, Caleb Thorne understood tragedy in its truest form. Not the loss of life, but the loss of every future that might have been. The barn was burning. Smoke curled through the rafters, thick and choking, painting the air with a bitter stench of pine and gunpowder. Caleb's lungs clawed for air as the flames licked closer, throwing dancing shadows across the fallen hay. Outside, the torches of the riders formed a red ring, closing tighter by the second. Nasya stood tall despite the smoke, her 7-foot frame backlit by fire, axe gripped in both hands. She looked less like a woman and more like a spirit of vengeance carved from the desert itself. "They want fear," she said, voice deep and steady. "We give them fight." But Caleb knew courage couldn't stop bullets. He'd seen what happened when desperate men fought hopeless battles. He tried to think, to plan, but the heat muddled everything. Behind him, Tala moaned, half-conscious, her breathing ragged, skin hot as a branding iron. Then came the voice again. "Naya." It rolled across the night like thunder, deep, commanding, certain of obedience. Bring out my bride and the white man who stole her from her people. Do it now, or we burn the rest. Naia's grip on the axe tightened until her knuckles turned white. He calls me his, she spat, but he owns nothing. Caleb crouched beside Tala. If we stay here, she dies before they ever reach her. Naia's eyes darted toward him, defiant but desperate. Then what? Run into open land? We are hunted. You are outlaw. No one will help. He didn't answer. The sound of the horses shifting outside filled the silence. Then a sharp whistle. A signal. A moment later, fire arrows rained down, bursting through the thatch roof. Sparks scattered across the hay like stars from hell. Caleb threw himself over Tala as Naia swung the axe, knocking one flaming shaft aside. They'll burn you alive before sunrise, he shouted. I burn only once, she growled, storming toward the door. But before she could reach it, the barn wall exploded inward. A horseman crashing through the smoke, pistol raised. Caleb fired instinctively. The shot tore the man from his saddle, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Another rider appeared behind him, shouting orders. The chaos gave them seconds, maybe less. Caleb grabbed Tala's arm. We can't fight them all. Naia hesitated, torn between vengeance and survival. The flames roared higher, forcing her decision. She seized Tala by the shoulders and hauled her up as if she weighed nothing. Together, they stumbled through the collapsing side of the barn and into the open desert. Bullets screamed past them. Caleb fired blindly over his shoulder, catching one rider in the leg. But there were too many, shadows circling in the firelight. Naia reached the corral, pushing her sister onto a half-wild mare. Go, she commanded, but Caleb refused to leave her behind. You'll never outrun them alone. Naia turned, face streaked with soot, eyes fierce with something between fury and grief. If I die, she lives. That is enough. Before he could argue, she shoved him hard against the saddle, sending him sprawling beside Tala. The mare reared, startled by the flames, then bolted into the darkness. Caleb twisted around just in time to see Naia standing amid the burning barn, her massive silhouette framed by fire, axe in hand. As the chief's son rode straight toward her, the two collided in a blur of steel and shadow. Caleb's cry was swallowed by the wind. By dawn, the desert was silent again. The fire had devoured the ranch, leaving only black bones of timber. Caleb and Tala awoke miles away, half dead from exhaustion and smoke. The mare had carried them until she collapsed. Tala's first words were a whisper, broken by pain. Where? My sister? Caleb had no answer. Only the image burned into his mind of a giant woman standing defiant against the flames. He knew she was gone, or worse, captured. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the chief's son would not rest until he found them, until he reclaimed what he believed was his. Caleb tightened his jaw. Then we find her first. He looked back toward the plume of smoke rising in the distance. The funeral pyre of his home, his life, and maybe his soul. For the first time, he wasn't just running for survival. He was running for redemption. The desert was merciless by day, but the night was worse. Cold crept into the bones, and silence pressed on the ears until it felt like drowning in emptiness. Caleb and Tala rode through that darkness, both half broken, her from wounds, him from loss. The mare's breath came in sharp, ragged bursts. Each hoofbeat sounded like a drum of mourning. Behind them, faint as a curse carried by wind, came the echo of pursuit. The chief's son was still hunting. Tala slumped forward in the saddle, eyes clouded with fever. Caleb steadied her, his arms circling her waist to keep her upright. Her skin burned against his, heat born of sickness and survival, not romance. Yet something within him twisted all the same. "Stay awake," he murmured. Her lips moved, dry and cracked. "My sister?" "We'll find her," he promised. "I swear it." Tala opened her eyes, dark, deep, filled with something fierce even through the pain. "You would die for her?" "For both of you," he said quietly. They rode until the moon dipped low, and the world became all silver and shadow. Finally, when the mare faltered, Caleb found a canyon, a scar in the land, hidden by brush. He helped her down, wrapped her in his coat, and built a fire with trembling hands. She watched him in silence, her expression unreadable. The giantess looked smaller now, almost fragile, her strength folded inward. The firelight painted her skin gold and red, highlighting every scar that told of battles fought long before she'd met him. "Why did you stay?" she asked suddenly. "You could have left us to die." Caleb stared into the fire. "Because I know what dying alone feels like." Tala tilted her head, the faintest hint of curiosity in her exhaustion. "Your woman?" He nodded. "Fever took her. Winter came too soon. I buried her myself, same day I buried our child." The silence that followed was sacred. The flames cracked softly between them. Then Tala reached out, her hand enormous, rough from years of wielding weapons, and brushed her fingers against his. Her touch was light, careful, as if afraid of breaking him. "Your pain," she said. "I see it. Same as mine." Caleb met her eyes. In that instant, the desert faded. There were no tribes, no laws, no pursuit. Only two souls who had both lost everything that once made them human. She pulled her hand away first, but not before he saw the shimmer of tears that caught in the firelight. "They call me cursed," she said after a while. "Men fear me. Women say no spirit will bless my womb. I was to marry a man I despised, to give him sons I would never love. My sister helped me run. She paid the price." Caleb moved closer, his voice low. "You're not cursed." She gave a bitter laugh. "You see what I am, Caleb Thorne. Giant, savage, outlaw. You help me because you pity me." He reached out, catching her chin gently, forcing her to look at him. "I don't pity you," he said. "I'm standing in the desert with nothing left to my name, and still, I've never seen anything braver than you." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The fire popped. The wind whispered through the canyon. Then she leaned forward, barely, tentatively, her forehead resting against his. The warmth of her breath filled the cold night air. It wasn't a kiss, not yet. It was something raw. The silent understanding between two people who had lost too much to believe in forever, but still needed someone to survive the next sunrise. "I do not understand your world," she murmured. "But when you look at me, I forget the hatred of mine." He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Then maybe we build a new one. Just long enough to find your sister." The moment broke when the mare snorted, ears flicking toward the ridge. Caleb stiffened. A faint glow moved along the canyon rim. "Torches again." "They found us," he whispered. Tala rose unsteadily, her towering shadow swallowing the firelight. She reached for the rifle, her movements slow but steady now, purpose igniting where pain had lived. Caleb took her hand once more, squeezing it hard. "If we die tonight, we die together." She nodded, eyes fierce again. Better to die with truth than live with chains. As the torches crept closer, their fingers stayed intertwined. Two exiles lit by a dying fire, facing the world's cruelty not as enemies, not even as lovers, but as something rarer and harder, equals. By dawn, the desert wind had changed. The torches that once hunted them were gone, swallowed by distance and dust. But Caleb and Tala knew it wasn't over. Pursuers like the chief's son didn't tire, didn't forgive. They only paused long enough to reload. They followed a dry ravine until it widened into a valley. Bleached bones of trees, a thin line of water, trickling through stone. To anyone else, it was just another nameless canyon. But to Tala, it was sacred ground. "This place," she whispered. "Our people call it the River of Ghosts. The river that remembers." She knelt, touching the stream's surface with trembling fingers. "My sister would come here as a child," said the water carried the voices of those who died for truth. Caleb crouched beside her. The wind hissed through the rocks like distant whispers. "Then maybe she's still here," he said softly, "waiting for you." But as the light strengthened, they saw movement across the far ridge. Dark figures on horseback, silhouettes against the rising sun. The chief's son had found them. "Go," Caleb said, grabbing the rifle. "I'll draw them off." Tala shook her head. "No more running." She rose to her full height, towering, magnificent even in ruin. "I will face what hunts me." The riders descended, dust pluming behind them. The chief's son rode at the front, his eyes burning with rage. He called out in Apache, voice thick with venom. Caleb couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Surrender, beg, die. Instead, Tala stepped forward, raising her hands, not in fear, but in challenge. "I will not be owned," she shouted back. "Not by tribe, not by man, not by you." The chief's son spurred his horse, charging. Caleb fired once, missed, fired again, struck the rider beside him. Then another shot split the air, this one not from Caleb. It came from the ridge above. The chief's son jerked in the saddle, fell hard, his body tumbling into the sand. And there, standing among the rocks, tall and terrible, smoke still rising from a captured rifle, was Naya. She was alive, bloodied, her arm bound with a strip of leather, but her eyes were clear and burning. "You took long enough," she said hoarsely. Tala ran to her, collapsing into her sister's arms. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the sound of water and wind filled the canyon. The surviving riders fled, scattering like ghosts themselves. The hunt was over. Caleb watched the reunion, feeling the ache of everything he'd lost and the strange fullness of everything he'd found. When Naya turned to him, her towering shadow falling across the sand, she said simply, "You kept your word." He smiled wearily, barely. Days later, when the smoke of pursuit had faded for good, the three of them reached the riverlands near the border. There, in a place untouched by war or tribe, they began again, building a small trading post beneath the cliffs, where water and wind met. Caleb's hands, once meant for rifles and graves, built walls and gardens instead. Tala, her strength slowly returning, carved new patterns in the wood, symbols of rebirth and freedom. Naya protected them both, her watchful eyes guarding their fragile peace. One night, as the stars burned bright above the canyon, Tala sat beside Caleb by the fire. "You taught me something, white man," she said softly. He smiled. "That's a first." She turned toward him, eyes reflecting firelight. "You taught me that mercy is not weakness, and love is not surrender." He looked at her for a long moment, then took her hand. "And you taught me that giants aren't born from size. They're born from the courage to stand when everything tells you to kneel." They stayed like that in silence, listening to the whisper of the river of ghosts, where the past finally stopped chasing them. The frontier is not a place. It's a condition of the heart. It lives wherever fear meets courage, wherever hate meets compassion. Caleb Thorne learned that salvation isn't found in laws, tribes, or bloodlines. It's found in the moment you decide to protect what's right, even when the world says you're wrong. And perhaps that's the quiet truth the frontier was always trying to teach. A man's worth isn't measured by the land he owns or the battles he wins, but by the lives he chooses to save when no one is watching.